Hi everyone, welcome back to Extra Credit, and this is our 17th episode on ancient Rome. So last time we saw how the Emperor Diocletian at the end of the 3rd century tried to solve Rome's problems by splitting the empire up into two different halves, east and west, ruled by 4 emperors at once. And in honor of this game-changing moment in Roman history, and because it's been a long time since I blatantly ripped off John Green, let's start today with an open letter to Diocletian. Dear Diocletian, really? Like really? I mean really. So, righteous indignation aside, in 305 AD, when Diocletian retired to go spend more time with his cabbages, he really did leave the Roman Empire on a stronger foundation than it had had for decades up to this point. But if you've been following this series for any amount of time, or if you've ever just seen human beings being human beings, then you'll know that this whole let's hold hands and share power together thing isn't exactly going to work out. But even with the writing on the wall, it's still kind of shocking just how quickly everything came crumbling apart, beginning with Diocletian's retirement in the year 305 AD. See, the idea was that in each half of the empire, when the senior emperor called the Augustus retired or died, the junior emperor called the Caesar would immediately be bumped up to take that job. Now, in the east, this all went smoothly enough. When Diocletian retired, his spot was immediately filled by the former Caesar, a guy named Galerius, and then a new Caesar was chosen named Maximinus Daia. So far, so good. But in the west, there was, shall we say, a kerfuffle. And the grossly oversimplified version of the kerfuffle goes something like this. The original Western Augustus had been a guy named Maximian, and when his pal Diocletian retired in 305, he felt pressured to do the same, even though he really didn't want to. This meant that the Western Caesar named Constantius was immediately bumped up to the top job of Western Augustus, and the position of Caesar was immediately filled by a guy named Severus, who had had his eye on the position for several years, but had kept on getting passed over for guys like Gilderoy Lockhart, Remus Lupin, Mad Eye— oh, sorry, wrong Severus. Yeah, apparently this Severus never actually taught at Hogwarts. But anyway, the new Western Augustus named Constantius had a son named Constantine, aka today's main character, and with his own father being Augustus, Constantine felt that it was only right that he himself should become the new Caesar in the West instead of this Severus fellow. But instead, Constantine got completely shafted, even having to flee for his life because of a rumored assassination plot against him by Galerius. But then, just a year later, as so often occurs in history, something happened. The something was that in 306 AD, Constantine's father Constantius died suddenly and unexpectedly, which bumped Severus up to the top job of Western Augustus and left a vacancy in the Western Caesar position. Constantine himself lost no time in pouncing on this, and his loyal army troops immediately declared that they wanted him as their next boss. The thing is that Constantine was an ambitious young man, and he wasn't about to be satisfied with ruling one half of the Western Empire and being the junior ruler at that. Or to paraphrase Justin Timberlake, ruling part of the Western Empire isn't cool. You know what's cool? Ruling the whole empire. And thus, the kerfuffle. How it all fell out is incredibly complex, but in the end it all came down to a showdown between Constantine and his arch-rival, Maxentius. Like Constantine, Maxentius was himself the son of a former emperor, and he felt that it was his turn in the spotlight. So in the year 307 AD, he took over the city of Rome itself and declared himself a new emperor in the West. Naturally, there was no way that Constantine was going to tolerate this, so in the year 312 AD, he took the somewhat crazy step of marching into Italy itself, even though he was outnumbered more than 2-1 by Maxentius, and making war against his rival at the city of Rome itself. But as crazy as this might seem, Constantine had a secret weapon up his sleeve, giant monumental that he had borrowed from the Herodrum in Wait, what? Okay, so apparently the Romans are never actually going to get around to using monumental, but I don't see why not. They're totally amazing. Look what they do to the Rohirrim here. I mean, really. Anyways, Constantine really did have a secret weapon, which was his veterans. His troops were battle-hardened warriors who had been tested for years in their struggles against the northern barbarians, whereas Maxentius's army, even though it was vastly superior to Constantine's in terms of numbers, was pretty much made up of green recruits who would way rather have been at home doing whatever it was that people did before TikTok. What did they do before before TikTok. But even with all this taken into account, the real reason for Constantine's ultimate victory, spoiler alert, is said to have been a dream that he received the night before the battle. Now, it's worth noting that there are conflicting accounts of exactly what happened here, so the following is a simplified version. And the story goes like this. In his sleep the night before the battle, Constantine had a vision of a cross in the sky, and next to the cross were the words written, "In hoc signo vinces," which is Latin for, "In this sign you shall conquer." When Constantine awoke, he was convinced that the Christian God had spoken to him and was giving him a message about how to win the battle. In response, Constantine had his men immediately sew crosses onto their military uniforms and marched into battle against Maxentius with this Christian symbol at the forefront of his army. Constantine joined battle with Maxentius at Milvian Bridge, a spot outside the city of Rome, and despite being heavily outnumbered, crushed Maxentius's army and sent Maxentius and his men to their deaths in a watery grave. Constantine was now the undisputed master of Rome, and by the year 324 AD had dealt with all the other emperors as well to become the sole master of the Roman Empire. Now, by this time in their history, of course, it was nothing new for the Romans to get used to having a new guy on the throne, but what was new was that Constantine was the first Christian guy on the throne who had ever ruled Rome. And it's this fact that makes the Battle of Milvian Bridge not only one of the most significant moments in Roman history, but in all of world history, and Constantine himself one of the most monumental figures of all time. After all, it was in the year after the Battle of Milvian Bridge that Constantine launched the greatest revolution in human history by legalizing Christianity, thus paving the way for this religion to take its place as the most influential worldview of all time. This doesn't mean, of course, that the whole empire was transformed overnight, but it did swing the momentum decisively in that direction, with almost every single emperor after Constantine being a Christian, and many of the Romans themselves converting to this new religion. In fact, by the year 400 AD, about a century after Milvian Bridge, it's estimated that a majority of the Roman population across the empire were now believers in Jesus Christ. The obscure Jewish carpenter from Judea who had been killed by the Romans had now conquered the Romans. And as if all this wasn't enough, Constantine left an even more concrete mark, pun intended, by building a brand new capital city in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. You'll remember from our last episode that the city of Rome itself in the west was becoming less and less important because that part of the empire didn't have the same kind of wealth or history of great civilizations as the eastern part of the empire did. So Constantine had the idea to dream it all up again from scratch by building a so-called New Rome to reflect the glory and wealth of the East. The new capital would be built on the site of a Roman colony called Byzantium at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, and in a stroke of great humility, the emperor decided to name it Constantinople. Legend even has it that as Constantine planned the outline for this new city, an angel guided him and showed him where to walk, which clearly did not happen when they built Steinbach, just saying. Constantinople would go on to become one of the great cities of world history, standing for 1,000 years as a testimony to the might and magnificence that was Rome. Constantine himself, however, didn't last quite that long, but passed away in 337 AD after a respectable 3 decades in power. And even though the empire looked pretty much the same on the outside, the spiritual revolution that the emperor had unleashed would go on to transform not only Roman history, but world history for millennia to come. Which is probably what gave Constantine such a big head. I mean, seriously, look at this thing, it's massive. Hey everybody, thanks again for watching Extra Credit. It is always a blast making this show, as I say every single time, and it's still true. Your challenge for this week is to look into some of the un-Christian things that Constantine did during his life and reign, particularly his treatment of his wife and his son. As always, keep fit, have fun, read a book, play outside, and we'll see you next time.